In a world that claims to uphold justice, sometimes the most devastating injustice happens in the very halls built to protect the innocent. This story unfolds in a courtroom where the balance of law is skewed by bias and power, until an unintentional act of courage turns the tide. The core idea of this narrative revolves around exposing systemic injustice and fighting back through truth. At its heart lies the journey of a black teenager wrongfully sentenced not because of evidence, but because of the color of his skin and the explosive truth that finally sets him free. The story explores themes of racial prejudice, abuse of power, and the strength of community resistance. It also delves into the pain of being unheard, the fury of being scapegoated, and the life-changing impact of speaking truth to power. The moment that shifts everything is not an act of law, but the power of a hidden recording that cracks open an ugly truth. The genre sits firmly in social drama, infused with elements of a legal thriller, complete with courtroom intensity, moral dilemmas, and the unraveling of a carefully constructed lie. It examines real-world issues such as racial profiling, institutional corruption, and media manipulation, making the story painfully relatable and urgent. The emotional current of this story is driven by injustice and fury, pulling the audience into the helplessness of a young black teen whose voice is ignored and whose future is nearly destroyed. But just when all hope seems lost, the story flips into a powerful catharsis, a moment of release and raw relief as the truth is exposed and justice begins to fight its way back into the courtroom. The narrative tone will be gritty and realistic, not over-dramatized, but steeped in emotion and tension. The characters will feel like people you know or people you might be, making the stakes feel deeply personal. This isn't just a story about one teen and one judge. It's a story about what happens when a system breaks faith with its people, and how the smallest thread of truth can unravel the mightiest lie. The words echoed through the courtroom like a funeral bell. Cold, final, heavy with something no one could name, but everyone felt. Dante Williams stood up slowly, the weight of 17 years pressing down on him like a sentence already passed. He didn't look at the bailiff. He didn't look at the jury. He just stared at the floor, the same dull gray tiles he had memorized over the past 4 weeks of his trial. His mother clutched his hand, knuckles white, lips trembling. She whispered, "No matter what, baby, I love you." Dante wanted to believe her, but the truth was, he didn't know what he believed anymore. Across the aisle, the judge entered. Judge Raymond Kessler. White, stern, the kind of man who didn't smile unless it was to mock. His black robe flapped slightly as he took his seat, eyes scanning the courtroom like a hawk ready to devour its prey. He didn't see Dante as a child. He saw him as a threat, a statistic, a headline waiting to happen. The courtroom sat in suffocating silence as Judge Kessler shuffled his papers, cleared his throat, and began to speak. Dante Jerome Williams, you stand convicted of felony burglary and possession of an illegal firearm in connection with the incident on January 3rd. The court has reviewed the recommendations, considered the testimony, and now prepares to issue your sentence. Dante blinked. He had told them he was innocent. He had no gun. He wasn't even there, just caught on a camera walking past the block 20 minutes after it happened. But it hadn't mattered. The prosecutor painted him as a gang member, a liar, a troubled youth with a dangerous streak. His public defender barely fought back. Now came the hammer. I hereby sentence you, the judge said, pausing for effect, to 9 years in a state correctional facility, effective immediately. A gasp broke out in the gallery. His mother cried out. Someone swore under their breath. Dante's knees nearly buckled. 9 years, he choked. The judge's face stayed stone cold. This court has no tolerance for violent youth, especially in a city already overwhelmed by crime. Actions have consequences, Mr. Williams. Case closed. The gavel slammed like a gunshot. The guards were on him before the sound even faded. Mom, he shouted, voice cracking, Mom. But she couldn't reach him, couldn't touch him, couldn't stop the guards from dragging her baby boy through the courtroom like a convict. Tears streaked her face. My son is not a criminal, she screamed. He's a child. But no one listened. As Dante was pulled away, his eyes locked for a split second on a man sitting quietly in the back row, a janitor, or maybe a maintenance worker, holding a mop. He looked away quickly, but not before Dante noticed the strange expression on his face. A mix of fear and guilt. No one knew it yet, but that man had recorded something he was never meant to hear. And that recording would change everything. They slammed the door behind him, and Dante Williams flinched at the clang of steel and concrete. The holding cell reeked of bleach, sweat, and something sour. Fear, maybe. Fear had a smell. He knew that now. 17 years old. A straight A student. Honor roll. First chair in the school orchestra. None of it mattered. Not to the judge. Not to the cops. Not to the jury. In their eyes, he was just another angry black teen from the east side. Trouble in a hoodie. He sat on the edge of the cold bench, arms wrapped tightly around his chest, staring at nothing. The orange jumpsuit they'd shoved on him was too big, swallowing his frame and dignity all at once. Dante wasn't afraid of jail. He was afraid of disappearing, of being erased. He thought about his mom, probably still outside, fighting to talk to someone, anyone. She believed in the system. Always had. She taught him to respect it, to speak proper, keep his hands visible, and never raise his voice. But the system hadn't listened. It never had. His hands trembled as he remembered the moment the sentence dropped. 9 years. It echoed in his mind like a curse. He would be 26 when he got out. If he got out. He blinked back tears, refusing to cry in a cell where the walls had eyes. There was a story his granddad used to tell him when he was little, about rivers and storms. He'd say, "Boy, some people get boats. Others get storms. Your job ain't to curse the rain. It's to learn how to swim." Dante had always loved that story. But now, he didn't feel like swimming. He felt like drowning. The cell door buzzed, then opened. A guard stepped in, a bored look on his face. "Let's go, Williams." "Where?" Dante asked, barely above a whisper. "Processing. You're going in early." Dante stood up slowly. His knees wobbled. His fists clenched. He told himself to breathe, to stay calm, to not give them any reason to make things worse. They led him down fluorescent-lit halls that hummed like a broken radio, past more cells, more men with blank eyes, more silence. Every few steps, a door would slam shut behind him. Dante felt like he was descending into something, not just prison, but something deeper, something older, something built long before he was born, designed to hold people who looked like him. It wasn't lost on him that he was the youngest in the room at every stage. The youngest on trial. The youngest in the cell. The youngest in the chain line. The only thing younger was the truth, buried under false statements, crooked assumptions, and lazy evidence. And yet, Dante didn't scream. He didn't fight. He watched. He listened. Because deep down, behind the fear, behind the heartbreak, was something else. A fire. He wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. He thought of his little sister, Layla, who cried every time he missed a violin recital. He thought of his mother, who used to hum Nina Simone while combing his hair. He thought of his late father, shot outside a corner store when Dante was 5, who once told him, "They'll try to break you, son. Don't let them." So Dante made a decision. Right there, in the hallway between the court and the cage, with fluorescent lights flickering above and steel doors clanging shut behind him. He would survive. He would endure. And if the truth was buried, he'd dig it up with his own hands. What he didn't know, couldn't know, was that someone else had already started digging. A man in the courtroom. A man with a mop. A man with a conscience. And a recording. The morning after Dante's sentencing, the courthouse janitor, Harold Green, was pushing his mop through the dim corridors of courtroom 5B. A 62-year-old war veteran with a bad knee and a sharper mind than most gave him credit for, Harold had worked that courthouse for over a decade. He'd seen everything. Tears, tantrums, bribes, and betrayals. But something about yesterday's trial had sat wrong in his gut. He wasn't supposed to be in the courtroom after hours, but Judge Belmont had insisted on staying late. Something about reviewing evidence before the next case. Harold was cleaning nearby when he overheard muffled voices, voices that weren't supposed to be there. Curious, and admittedly nosy, Harold had leaned closer, his cart just outside the cracked door. Inside, Judge Belmont was speaking to Prosecutor Landry, and what they said changed everything. "I don't care if the kid's innocent," Belmont had grunted. "He fits the profile. The public wants blood." Landry chuckled. "We gave them a show. That's what matters. I covered for your sloppy case, Landry. Make sure your favors reach the right donors." Then silence. Papers shuffled. The gavel clicked on wood, not for justice, but as punctuation on corruption. Harold had backed away, heart thudding like a war drum. But not before checking something on his card. A small body cam clipped under the handle. It wasn't official. It wasn't legal. But after years of watching young black men railroaded through a rigged system, Harold had started recording things just in case. This time, just in case became everything. Back in his small apartment above the corner store, Harold replayed the clip 3 times. His hand trembled with every word. He didn't sleep that night. He just sat in his recliner, eyes on the screen, mind racing. By morning, he knew what he had to do. At the same time, in juvenile intake, Dante was handed a cheap bar of soap and a scratchy towel. Shower, then orientation, the guard barked. The other boys didn't speak to him much. A few stared. One muttered, another one down. He moved through it like a ghost. He barely registered the group therapist trying to make him open up. He didn't taste the lukewarm mashed potatoes at lunch. He only heard the echo of the sentence again and again. 9 years. After dinner, a counselor pulled him aside. Your public defender's coming by tomorrow. He wants to talk about an appeal. Dante blinked. An appeal? Yeah. Said there might have been a discrepancy in the proceedings. That was the first flicker of light. Faint. Fragile. But it reached him. That night, in the cramped bunk beside a kid who cried in his sleep, Dante whispered to himself, "Don't break." He didn't know that across town, Harold had already sent the video, first to a lawyer friend who owed him a favor, then to a local journalist who'd once promised to tell real stories. And when the video reached Assistant DA Mariella Cho, an idealist still clinging to the idea that law should equal justice, the fuse was lit. Cho had seen a lot of edited footage before, but this wasn't doctored. It was raw, clear, damning. She watched it 3 times, each time with a sinking feeling in her gut. Judge Belmont and Landry weren't just unethical. They were criminals cloaked in robes and degrees. By the next morning, her office was buzzing. You understand what this means? Her boss asked. This could blow up the entire court. She nodded. It should. He hesitated. You'll be a target. I already am. So is that kid. Cho reached out to Dante's public defender and told him to stall the processing. Then she made a decision that could end her career. She drafted a motion to stay the sentence and filed it with the Court of Appeals. Meanwhile, the journalist who'd received the footage from Harold made her move. At 3 p.m., a clip titled "Leaked Audio Reveals Racial Bias in High-Profile Teen Sentencing" was posted to a local news blog. It had less than 2,000 followers. But the story spread like wildfire. Within hours, it was trending on Twitter. By evening, national news outlets were calling the station, demanding to confirm the leak. Public outrage swelled. People who'd been silent during the trial now screamed for justice. Protests gathered outside the courthouse. Parents held signs that read, "My son could be Dante." Celebrities reposted the clip. Civil rights lawyers demanded Judge Belmont be suspended. The system that had tried to bury Dante began to crack. But it wasn't celebration time yet. Because inside the courthouse, Belmont was fuming. And Landry? Landry was already plotting. He knew that if the video was real, and he had no doubt it was, then his career was over. Unless he found a way to bury that truth too. He began reaching out to contacts. Find that janitor, he hissed into his phone, and find out if that kid has anyone helping him. In his cell, Dante knew none of this. Not yet. He only felt the shift, guards suddenly acting tense, whispers down the corridor, the counselor suddenly kind. And then, late that night, the same one returned with a folded note. Your lawyer says, don't lose hope. Big changes are coming. Dante stared at the note. He didn't know why, but this time, he believed it. The following morning dawned gray over the city. Clouds stretched low like they carried the weight of secrets too heavy to hold. Inside the courthouse, the mood was more electric than somber. Protesters had gathered in droves, their chants reverberating off the marble columns and echoing through the halls of so-called justice. At the heart of the storm was Dante, just 16, still in juvenile lockup, but suddenly at the center of a civil rights firestorm. His public defender, Mr. Carroll, arrived early. He was different today, energized, focused. For the first time in weeks, he had fire in his eyes. They're reopening the case, Carroll said, barely able to contain his excitement. The appellate court granted a stay based on new evidence. Dante blinked. What kind of evidence? Carroll handed him a printout. A janitor, Harold Green. He had a recording. Belmont and Landry were caught talking about how they knew you were innocent, about how they wanted to lock you up anyway. Dante's stomach turned. He felt dizzy. They said that. Carol nodded. Word for word. The whole country's seen it by now. You're trending, kid. Dante wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. For so long, he'd been invisible. Now the world knew his name, but only because of how badly he'd been broken. The celebration didn't last long. Carol's face grew serious. They're not backing down easily. Landry's still in play. He's trying to suppress the recording, calling it illegally obtained and inadmissible. And Belmont? He's gone silent. We think he's pulling strings behind the scenes. Dante swallowed hard. So, I'm not free yet. No, but you're not alone anymore. That's the difference. At a local news studio across town, Mariella Cho was being interviewed live. Why risk your position to expose this? The host asked. Cho sat upright. Because silence is complicity. This isn't just about Dante. This is about a system designed to swallow boys like him whole, especially if they're black, poor, or defenseless. I got into law to fight for justice. I couldn't ignore this. The clip went viral within an hour. Outside the juvenile center, more people gathered. Students marched from local colleges, holding signs that read, "Free Dante now. Justice not just us. And judges aren't gods." In the eye of this growing storm, Harold Green gave his first statement. Reporters swarmed the stoop of his apartment. Why did you record that conversation, Mr. Green? Harold scratched his beard. Because I've seen too many good boys lose their lives before they even had a chance to live them. I thought maybe, just maybe, one day, I'd have something that could change that. And he did. His quiet courage sent shockwaves through a community desperate for truth. Back inside, Dante was finally allowed a call. He dialed his mother. Ma. Her voice cracked. Baby? Oh my God, baby. I'm okay, he said, though he wasn't sure it was true. They're reopening everything. There's this video, Ma. It proves they lied. They lied about me. She broke down sobbing on the other end. I prayed every night. I told God, you bring my boy back. You clear his name. And now maybe he is. It was the first time in weeks Dante allowed himself to feel something close to hope. But hope wasn't a promise. That same afternoon, a private meeting convened in Judge Belmont's office. Landry slammed his hand on the desk. This is getting out of control. That janitor, that DA, they've made this a circus. Belmont leaned back, steepling his fingers. We underestimated the boy. And the janitor. You said we were covered. You said the case was airtight. I said the court wouldn't question us. I didn't expect a damn spy with a camera. Landry was pacing now. We need to get that footage suppressed. Chain of custody. Consent. Make it disappear. Belmont's eyes narrowed. Or discredit the janitor. You forget how many favors you owe me, Landry. Fix this. Landry nodded. But inside, a pit was forming in his gut. This wasn't just about one case anymore. It was about exposure. And survival. Back in lockup, Dante was finally granted a visitation room meeting with Mariella Cho. She looked him in the eyes and smiled warmly. You don't know me, but I'm fighting for you. Why? He asked, confused. Why do you care? She paused. Because I once prosecuted someone like you. He was 17. I believe the cops. I believe the evidence. He served 8 years before we found out it was all fake. He lost everything. And I lost a piece of myself. Dante studied her. She meant it. Every word. You're not just a case, she said. You're a human being. And we're going to prove that to the world. For the first time, Dante let his walls crack. Thank you, he whispered. She reached across the table and took his hand. You don't have to thank me. Just don't give up. That's all I ask. In the days that followed, things escalated fast. Landry tried to file a motion to have the video suppressed. But a coalition of civil rights lawyers filed a counter motion with the appellate court, and they won. The footage would be allowed. Judge Belmont was suspended pending investigation. Dante's case was officially reopened, and the new hearing date was set, 2 weeks from now. Carol called it a miracle, but Dante knew better. Miracles were rare. This was something else. This was truth clawing its way out of a grave someone else had tried to bury it in. And now, the world would see. 2 nights before the hearing, Dante lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Another kid in the next cell played soft guitar chords on a broken instrument. The notes drifted like ghosts. A guard passed by, pausing for a moment. You got people rooting for you, kid, he said, softer than usual. Dante sat up. Even you. The guard shrugged. Never liked Landry. And Belmont? He always walked like he thought the floor owed him something. Dante smirked. That's the first time you've been real with me. The guard tapped the bars and moved on. But it was enough. Dante closed his eyes, clutching the worn prayer card his mother had once tucked into his pocket. He had no idea how the hearing would go, but he knew he wouldn't be standing alone this time. Not anymore. The day of the hearing arrived like a drumbeat, steady, unstoppable, and thunderous. Outside the courthouse, it looked like a movement had taken over the city. The streets were lined with signs. We believe Dante. Justice for all. Black Lives Matter. News cameras surrounded the building, flashing with every step as Mariella Cho, Harold Green, and Mr. Carroll made their way inside. And then came Dante. Handcuffed, guarded, but not defeated. The moment he stepped out of the transport van, the crowd erupted in applause. Some cried. Others chanted his name. A few fell silent in reverence. He'd been silenced, buried, erased. But here he was, walking into court not as a suspect, but as a survivor. In the courtroom, it was standing room only. Judge Renata Ellis, stern, precise, and known for her integrity, presided over the hearing. The prosecution side was almost bare. Landry sat alone, his face pale, his eyes twitching nervously. Belmont was absent, having resigned days earlier under threat of criminal charges and a looming FBI probe. As Dante took his seat beside Carroll, his mother sat directly behind him. She reached out and touched his shoulder. "You're already free in here," she whispered, placing her hand over his heart. "Now the rest of the world just has to catch up." The hearing began with Mariella Cho presenting the video. The room was so silent, you could hear a pin drop. Belmont's voice echoed through the speakers. "That boy? He's a pawn. We're setting an example." Landry's voice followed. "He's just another number. Slam the gavel, clear the docket." "Done." Gasps filled the room. The judge's face remained stoic, but her eyes betrayed something deeper, fury. Landry squirmed in his seat. "That recording was illegally obtained." "Not true," Cho cut in. "Mr. Green recorded it while cleaning a public hallway. No expectation of privacy, no legal precedent barring it." "And the context?" "Couldn't be clearer. You and Belmont conspired to knowingly convict an innocent child." Harold Green then took the stand. He spoke quietly but with conviction, describing the moment he realized what he had. "I thought about my grandsons. I thought if that was one of them, I'd want someone to stand up." Next, Carroll outlined the original case's holes: missing DNA, absent fingerprints, the fake confession. Every detail unraveled like threads pulled from a fraying rope. And then, Dante was called to speak. He stood, walked to the front, looked the judge straight in the eye. "I was scared," he began. "But not just of prison. I was scared no one would ever see me again. Like I didn't matter. Like my life could be erased because two men in suits decided it didn't fit their story." His voice trembled, but he didn't stop. "I didn't fight back because I didn't think I could. But I know better now. I know I'm not just a number. I'm not a case file. I'm not a pawn." He looked out at the room, at his mother, at Mariella, at Harold, at the crowd. "I'm someone." Silence. Then applause. Not from everyone, but enough to shake the walls. Judge Ellis called a brief recess. When she returned, her robe seemed to carry more gravity than before. She cleared her throat. "This court has reviewed all evidence, including the newly submitted recording, testimony, and original case files. It is the opinion of this court that the conviction of Dante Brooks was based on prosecutorial misconduct and judicial bias of the highest order." She paused. "And therefore, this court hereby vacates the conviction. Dante Brooks, you are free to go." Gasps. Cheers. Cries. Cameras flashed. Dante's knees nearly buckled. His mother rushed to him. They embraced, sobbing, clinging, shaking, like the years they'd lost were being poured back into them all at once. Carroll wiped his eyes. Mariella let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for hours. And Harold Green simply bowed his head in quiet thanks. Outside, Dante stood on the courthouse steps. No handcuffs, no guards, no shame. Just sunlight. A reporter called out, "Dante, what's next for you?" He looked around, overwhelmed but strong. "I'm gonna live," he said simply. "And I'm gonna help others live too. No one else should have to go through this. Not ever again." He didn't know exactly how, but he knew why. And sometimes, Knowing why is enough to change the world. Months later, Judge Belmont was indicted on conspiracy charges and obstruction of justice. Landry lost his license to practice law. Mariella Cho became a national figure in justice reform, launching an organization dedicated to fighting wrongful convictions. And Dante? He went back to school, started working with kids in his neighborhood, told his story at rallies and on television. He became the voice he once never thought he had. He was no longer invisible. He was undeniable.